Hello everyone and welcome to my presentation on tribal governments and emergency management. First, a little about myself. My name is Tyler Duncan and I got my Bachelor of Arts in Criminology from West Virginia in 2015. I am currently at Florida State pursuing my Master's of Science in Criminology and Criminal Justice. I am taking this class because it fulfills requirements for my certificate in emergency management. I chose this subject because we have not discussed it in class and it seems like interesting material. In order to understand emergency management at the tribal government level, we must first understand what tribal governments are. Tribal governments, or Indian nations, are tribes, bands, pueblos, communities, and villages of Native Americans that are sovereign entities. They are self-governed and responsible for almost all typical government activities. Currently, there are 566 Indian nations that are recognized by the federal government. Interestingly enough, if you are a citizen of an Indian tribe, you are a sovereign citizen of that tribe, the state in which you reside, and the United States. When it comes to emergency management, tribal governments are often the only form of government in rural and isolated areas that many tribes are found in. Because of this, tribal governments are often the first and only form of law enforcement and first responders in the event of an emergency or disaster. However, because emergencies and disasters still affect tribal nations frequently, mutual aid and assistance agreements are often in place with other neighboring jurisdictions and tribes. Because they are sovereign entities, tribal leaders have many of the same emergency management responsibilities that state governors have. They are responsible for the general prevention, preparation, response, and recovery in their areas, and additionally, in the event of an emergency, they are responsible for decision making, public information, and ensuring essential provisions and services are provided to their communities. However, according to the Stafford Act, only the state governor can request a presidential disaster declaration. Tribal leaders must then seek approval from the governor first in order to get a disaster declaration for their tribe. When it comes to emergency management, tribal governments have several options for seeking aid and assistance in the event of an emergency or disaster. Like local governments, should their resources be exceeded, they can ask for state assistance. Furthermore, because of their sovereign nation status, they can choose to seek direct assistance from the federal government from agencies like FEMA. This is, however, subject to the limitations of the Stafford Act, as mentioned previously. There are several organizations that are committed to helping tribal nations in the event of an emergency or a disaster. The NCAI, or the National Congress of American Indians, and the NTEMC, or the National Tribal Emergency Management Council, send funding and resources to affected nations in emergencies and disasters. The Administration for Native Americans is primarily concerned with matters regarding children and families. FEMA assists in the same manner it would with local, state government emergencies, and the Department of Homeland Security ensures that tribal nations are prepared for potential terrorist attacks and man-made disasters. Each year, the National Tribal Emergency Management Council hosts a conference on emergency management. They bring together tribal nations and emergency management organizers in order to improve mitigation, preparation, response, and recovery in tribal nations across the country. The conference this year is in September and is hosted in California. For more information, visit the Council's website at ntemc.org. There is always room to improve emergency management, and that remains true with tribal nations. First, the Stafford Act must be amended so that tribal leaders can request presidential disaster declarations directly. Second, the sovereignty of tribal nations must continue to be preserved. Third, cooperation and coordination with all levels of government and other tribal nations should be encouraged in tribal nations across the country. Finally, tribal nations should continue to strengthen the four pillars of emergency management. Mitigation, preparation, response, and recovery are vital in communities across the country. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to our discussion. If you would like more information on tribal nations and emergency management, please visit the sources used for this presentation.